There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't look like loneliness at all. It looks like being fine. It looks like needing space. It looks like losing feelings the moment someone gets too close. It looks like saying, "I just don't want drama," while your chest tightens at the thought of being truly seen. And maybe that's why this hurts in such a quiet way. Because if you are secretly avoidant, you may have spent years thinking your problem was other people. They were too emotional, too needy, too intense, too much. You told yourself you just wanted peace, simplicity, freedom. But deep down, what you were really escaping was not them. It was the exposure. It was the terrifying intimacy of being known closely enough that someone could touch the part of you that still remembers disappointment, engulfment, criticism, rejection, pressure, or the unbearable weight of needing someone and not feeling safe to need them. So now, closeness does not feel like love. It feels like danger. And the brutal truth is this. Sometimes the distance you call standards is actually self-protection. Sometimes the independence you are proud of is a beautiful disguise for fear. Sometimes the thing you think is discernment is just your nervous system slamming the door before anyone can get close enough to leave a mark. That truth stings because it doesn't make you cold. It makes you wounded in a very intelligent way. You adapted. You became hard to reach because somewhere in your body, being reachable once cost too much. And if this is you, I want you to listen carefully, because what looks like detachment on the outside often has nothing to do with not caring. In fact, some of the most avoidant people care so deeply that their system cannot metabolize the intensity of it. Their amygdala reads intimacy as a threat. Their cortisol rises when someone becomes emotionally consistent. Their dopamine gets tangled up in distance, unpredictability, and almost love, because yearning feels safer than arrival. Their nervous system has learned a strange equation. Want them, but don't let them in. So when connection becomes real, something inside you starts pulling the emergency brake. Not because you feel nothing, because you feel too much. That's the part people miss, and maybe that's the part you miss too. You think you lost interest. You think the spark died. You think they changed. But sometimes what actually happened is that they got close enough to matter, and your body confused care with captivity. And suddenly, everything in you started searching for an exit. You became irritated by tiny things. You felt smothered by normal affection. You needed hours, then days, then silence. You convinced yourself the chemistry was off. You started fantasizing about a life with more freedom, more air, more distance. Not because they were wrong for you, because the intimacy was activating an old survival script. If you've ever wondered whether you might secretly be avoidant, the signs are rarely loud at first. They live in your timing, your reflexes, your sudden emotional disappearances. They live in the way your body recoils from what your heart has begged for. Maybe it begins with how deeply you crave connection until it is actually available. When someone is distant, unavailable, emotionally ambiguous, you can think about them for hours. You can feel consumed. There is ache, anticipation, fantasy. Your mind lights up. Your dopamine loves the chase, the uncertainty, the possibility. But when someone shows up clearly, consistently, warmly, something shifts. The mystery is gone. The safety should feel relieving, but instead it feels flat, heavy. You tell yourself you're bored, but what if you're not bored? What if calm feels unfamiliar, and your system only recognizes longing as passion? That is one of the quietest signs of avoidance. You feel most alive in almost love. And that should break your heart a little, because it means you may have been starving in front of full plates, calling nourishment lack of chemistry, simply because it didn't come wrapped in anxiety. Maybe another sign is how quickly you retreat after moments of real closeness. You can have a beautiful conversation, a vulnerable night, a moment where someone really sees you, and instead of feeling more connected afterward, you feel exposed, raw, strange. You pull back, you text less, you become harder to read, you need to reset.
You tell yourself you're just processing, but what you're actually doing is regulating after intimacy hit your nervous system like a stressor. This is why avoidant patterns are so confusing to both people involved. One person feels the bond deepening, and the other suddenly goes quiet. One person thinks, we're finally getting somewhere. The other feels an urgent need to disappear for a while. It's not random. It's not always manipulation. It's often overwhelm. Then there's the way you turn feelings into thoughts. Someone asks how you feel, and your mind becomes a courtroom. You analyze, you explain, you give context. You become articulate, even brilliant. But the raw emotional truth stays just out of reach. Not because you are dishonest, because emotional directness feels too naked. So instead of saying, I'm scared you'll need too much from me, you say, I've just been under a lot of stress. Instead of saying, I care about you and that scares me, you say, I'm not sure I'm in the right place for a relationship. Your mind becomes a translator for feelings your body still doesn't feel safe expressing. And people around you may think you are clear because you sound composed. But inside, there is often a war between longing and shutdown, tenderness and escape. Another sign is how strongly you associate love with pressure. Even healthy affection can start to feel like expectation. A sweet text feels like an obligation to respond perfectly. A partner's need for reassurance feels like control. Someone wanting more closeness feels, in your body, like you're about to lose yourself. So you protect your autonomy with almost spiritual intensity. Space becomes sacred. Independence becomes identity. And without realizing it, you start treating emotional access to you like a privilege so rare that nobody can ever fully relax around you. You don't mean to create emotional scarcity. It just happens. Because somewhere inside, dependence still feels dangerous. Maybe because when you needed people most, they weren't emotionally available. Or they were too intrusive, too inconsistent, too critical. Maybe love came with pressure, guilt, enmeshment, or instability. So now, your nervous system doesn't just fear abandonment. It fears absorption. It fears being swallowed whole. That's why avoidance is not simply fear of losing people. It is often fear of losing yourself inside them. And then there is this painful pattern. You miss people most when they stop reaching. While they are available, you feel crowded. When they finally step back, something wakes up. The silence expands. Your body relaxes, just enough for your feelings to rise to the surface. Suddenly,
You remember their softness, their consistency, the way they tried. Suddenly, you want to text. Suddenly, you wonder if you made a mistake. This is where so many people get confused. They think, if I miss them now, then I must have cared all along. And yes, maybe you did. But your feelings often become accessible only when the immediate threat of closeness is gone. Distance lowers the pressure. The amygdala stops firing so loudly. The nervous system loosens its grip. And underneath the shutdown, love is still there. Regret is still there. Grief is still there. They didn't stop caring. They felt overwhelmed. That line alone could change how you see years of your life. Because maybe the problem was never your capacity to love. Maybe it was your capacity to stay open while loving. Maybe another sign is how quickly you find flaws when someone starts mattering. In the beginning, you can be all in, warm, charming, attentive. But as soon as the bond grows teeth, your vision changes. Suddenly, their laugh is annoying. Their needs are exhausting. Their habits feel incompatible. Their presence feels slightly off. You start building a mental case against the relationship, often out of details that would have felt insignificant a month ago. This does not always mean the relationship is wrong. Sometimes it means your system is trying to create emotional distance by making closeness feel less desirable. If you can convince yourself they're not quite it, you don't have to face the deeper terror of staying. Then there is the strange comfort of being unreadable. You reveal enough to keep things going, but not enough to be held. You can be affectionate without being fully accessible. You can stay in contact without letting someone all the way in. You can care deeply and still make sure there is always a door behind you. You keep the exit lit. Always. And maybe the last sign is the one that hurts most. You often don't realize what you felt until it is too late. In the moment, your body prioritizes survival over truth. It numbs, minimizes, distracts, detaches. But later, when the person is gone, when the window has closed, when the house is quiet and nobody is asking anything from you anymore, your emotions return like delayed grief. You finally feel the tenderness you defended against. You finally see what was there. And now there is no one left to give it to. That is the hidden tragedy of avoidance. Not that you never loved, that you often loved behind glass. This is why the core concept here is silence. Not just the silence between texts, the silence inside your body. The pause where you disconnect before you can be touched. The internal muting. The emotional volume drop that happens the moment love starts asking to be real. Avoidant patterns live in that silence. They feed on it. They convince you that because you cannot feel clearly in the moment, there is nothing there to feel. But silence is not always absence. Sometimes silence is suppression. Sometimes it is your nervous system dimming the lights because the room got too emotionally bright. Think about that. How many times have you called your own shutdown clarity? How many times have you mistaken numbness for truth? Now imagine the inner world of someone who is secretly avoidant. They like you more than they planned to. Your presence starts becoming medicine. Your consistency starts softening places in them they forgot were still in pain. And instead of melting fully into that relief, they tense. They begin to think things like, "This is moving fast. I need to slow this down. Why do they want so much from me? What if I can't give them what they need? What if I disappoint them? What if I lose my freedom? What if they see how confused I really am? What if I start needing them back? So they go quiet. They delay. They cool down. They become vague. They pick small fights with the closeness itself.
And the other person, often anxiously attached or simply emotionally available, feels the shift immediately. They lean in harder. They ask for reassurance. They try to fix what they can feel slipping. But this only increases the pressure inside the avoidant person. More closeness, more need, more urgency, more cortisol, more shutdown. This is how the dance begins. Not because one person loves and the other doesn't. Because one person reaches for connection under stress and the other retreats from it under stress. And the tragedy is that both people can end up feeling rejected, while both are, in their own way, terrified. But here is where the power starts to flip. Because the pattern only survives if it remains unconscious. The moment you see it, really see it, you stop romanticizing your disappearing acts as self-protection without cost. You stop calling chronic emotional distance maturity. You stop admiring the part of you that can detach in seconds as if it is strength. Sometimes detachment is not power. Sometimes it is panic with good posture. Real power is staying present long enough to tell the truth. Real power is noticing the urge to run and not immediately obeying it. Real power is feeling the activation in your chest, the need to pull away, the sudden drop in warmth, and asking, is this loss of interest? Or is this my nervous system trying to save me from vulnerability? Real power is learning that peace is not the same thing as numbness. Real power is letting consistency feel unfamiliar without making it wrong. And something almost unbelievable happens when you stop feeding the avoidant cycle. You become less haunted by unavailable people. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop chasing the high of uncertainty. You stop waiting until someone is gone to discover how much they mattered. You stop making silence your identity. And yes, this changes the entire dynamic. Because when you no longer collapse into pursuing what withdraws or performing for what withholds, the old patterns around you start breaking. The people who relied on your reactivity can no longer control your state. The relationships built on distance begin to expose themselves. The fantasy loses its glow, and the version of you that once equated longing with love starts waking up to something stronger than obsession. Self-respect. That is the shift. Not getting them back, getting yourself back. Because if you are secretly avoidant, the deepest wound is not just relational. It is identity-based. Somewhere along the way, you learned that your needs were too much. Your emotions were inconvenient. Your dependence was unsafe. Your softness needed armor. So you built a self around not needing, not asking, not staying too open. But healing does not begin when someone finally loves you enough to break through that wall. Healing begins when you stop worshipping the wall. When you realize the distance did protect you once, but now it is also starving you. When you admit that being hard to hurt has made it hard to receive. When you understand that the version of you who pulls away is not evil, not broken, not cold, just scared, just trained, just tired. And this is your warning. If you keep calling every activation a sign to leave, you will keep abandoning things that were never actually unsafe. If you keep interpreting calm as emptiness, you will keep choosing emotional roller coasters over real intimacy. If you keep waiting to feel after the loss, you will keep learning love through regret. If you keep hiding behind silence, you will eventually become a stranger to your own heart. Do not let avoidance turn your life into a museum of almosts. There is too much life waiting on the other side of your honesty. There is too much peace in being loved without performing. There is too much freedom in not needing to escape every time something becomes real. There is too much dignity in being the kind of person who can stay, speak, feel, and remain whole. You do not have to become more detached to be powerful. You have to become more available to yourself. That is the real transformation. To be the person who no longer mistakes distance for safety. To be the person who can feel fear without building a home inside it. To be the person who recognizes that being affected is not weakness. To be the person who stops disappearing from their own life. Maybe you are secretly avoidant.
Maybe that explains years of confusion, lost connections, mixed signals, emotional whiplash, and the aching pattern of wanting what leaves and leaving what stays. But that is not your destiny. That is just your conditioning. And conditioning can be interrupted. Right here, right now, by telling the truth, by noticing the silence, by staying one breath longer, by not fleeing the moment your heart starts to matter, by understanding that overwhelm is not the same thing as absence, by giving yourself the chance to experience a kind of love your old nervous system has never known how to trust. You are not too independent to be loved. You are not too complicated to be understood. You are not too far gone to change. You are just being asked to stop calling survival your personality. And once you do that, everything changes. Because the most powerful version of you is not the one who can walk away without flinching. It is the one who no longer has to.